There are only two things that I won't eat for breakfast: lunch and dinner. That's a dad joke right there. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, and thank you for being here for everybody else. Now, if you're not a dad yet, or you're a mom maybe, you don't know this, but they do run you through a class. And it takes some time for it to become natural when someone says, I'm going to run to the store, and you got to be quick with the driving would be faster, those kinds of jokes. It's a dad joke, it's a bad one. But we're so glad again that you're here. I want to invite you to open up your Bibles this morning to 1 Samuel chapter 3. My name is Cale Courtright, the preaching minister here, and if you are new with us today, we are so glad that you are here. Last week, we finished up a series on Ruth, and some people have asked, well, what are we doing next? And today it starts what I would call just our summer series. And what I mean by that is there's not going to be a one thing that we'll be doing during this time, but we will be doing a couple different things over the course of the rest of the summer. I've talked about it. We sat down and planned with the staff, and we are really excited about this summer, about what God's going to do during this time. Now, for Mother's Day, we talked about Hannah. And so I thought it would be fitting to talk about her son for Father's Day. If you remember on Mother's Day, I said something along the lines of, I have a mom, I'm married to a mom, and I'm not dumb, so we keep those very encouraging. We love our moms, they're the best, and I'm not a mom, so I don't, preach the same as I might for Father's Day, because I am a father. And so just know that whatever you hear, it was written by a dad, and first for this dad. And I told you then that, we keep that one really encouraging, Mother's Day. But this one we make it more challenging. And so I warned you ahead of time, okay? So we're going to talk about Samuel today. This is also, I want to just say before we start, this is for everyone. If you're sitting here today and you are not a father, I want you to know this is also for you. Today we're essentially going to be talking about what it means to raise somebody else. And what I mean by that is not just raising your children, though I will use that most often today. I also mean in terms of when Jesus sends us out and he says, go out into all the world making disciples, that we are called to be disciples making disciples. We're called to raise up other people. And so this is also for everyone. It's a common story that you probably have heard before. My hope is that we'll see it in a fresh way today. Verse 1 of 1 Samuel chapter 3. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of the covenant was. So I want to set the scene before we dive into the things I want to talk about today, but things are not going well in Israel. They want you to know that from the outset, is that there have not been visions of late. It's another way of saying God is not speaking, or at least speaking in a way that they can hear. And so much so, this is even seen from the highest of high. Even the leadership is not going well in Israel. In fact, they might be leading the way on their failings. Over the last 10 or 15 years, there's been lots of stories in the news about failures of leadership, specifically in churches. There's been stories, there's been movies even made about it, and it's always heartbreaking, isn't it, when there is a failure of leadership, specifically in the church. And sometimes it's been that they're not leading well, and sometimes it is so much so there's been abuse happening, abuse and cover-up. And these stories break our heart, not that the story is broken, but that the story had to be written at all. And that's kind of what's going on in our time here in 1 Samuel. That's what's going on in their day. There's been a failure of leadership. If you saw what he just said, there have been no visions. And Eli, whose eyes are failing. Now, on one hand, that's a way of saying that he's getting old. But what the writer really wants you to know is that he cannot see. He has no spiritual insight. His eyes are failing. Have there not been visions, or has there been a failure of leadership? That's really the question here. And what we have here is that the writer wants you to know there is still hope. In fact, that's the point of the story, is the hope is going to be found in Samuel and who God is calling him to be. What you see here is just a juxtaposition between Eli and Samuel. Where are they found? They're not together. There's at least there's a space here. Eli is in his usual place. Samuel is lying in the house of the Lord. They're not together. Eli has become apathetic, while Samuel is dedicated. But again, what the writer wants you to know is that the lamp of God had not yet gone out, that there is still hope. So today we're going to read the rest of this story, and there are 3 things in here that I think will be important for us to know on what it looks like to raise a child, to raise up other people. But before we do, I want to ask you a question. Again, I'm going to ask this in terms of to the parents in the room, to the fathers in the room, but this is really for anybody. What do you hope for your children? What are the hopes that you have for your kids? And maybe you think about it in terms of outcomes. When you think about their academics, or their sports, or their job in the future, or maybe their future spouse, or their faith, what is your hope for them? What is it that you want for your kids? Let's read in verse 4. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." He ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I didn't call. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. Again the Lord called Samuel. Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Now, anyone who has been a parent has lived out this story. You've been there before where you've put your kids to bed, you're going to go sit down, you're going to relax a little bit, you're going to be, on parent time, not parenting time, and then you hear that door open. Parenting is having to get up as soon as you sit down, over and over and over again. And you know the story, your kid gets up and they go, "I got to go to the bathroom. I need a drink of water." Or maybe they even go, I really would like a Bible story. And what are you supposed to say to that? No Bible story for you. Back to bed. That's essentially how I'm reading this story. Eli is saying, it's time for you to go to bed. And the first thing that we see in here is that parenting requires patience. It's that if you are going to parent well, if you're going to walk with somebody else for a long time, it requires patience. And here's the thing, I don't know about you, but when I think about patience, I think that it should be easy. As if the waiting I shouldn't even notice that it's happening. But you've all been there before. You show up at 9:15 for your 9:30 doctor's appointment. And they're not quite ready, but that's okay because you're early. But it's 9:35 and you're like, all right. 9:45 and you're starting to stretch a little bit. 10 o'clock, you go, what's the point of an appointment? Why am I here already if you're not ready for me? And that's when patience starts to get a little bit difficult. I can promise you this. Parenting will test your patience unlike anything else that you typically do. That they know how to help you learn just where your limits of patience are. Patience is supposed to be hard. You're supposed to feel it. And when you get to that point, it's whether or not, now you ask yourself, now what do I do now that I'm at my limit? I love this from Ephesians chapter 4. As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. I really thought about using these verses for Father's Day because this is what it means to be a parent. This is what it means to walk with somebody else for a long time. As a parent, you have been called. You have to live into your parenthood in a worthy manner. It's one of the most important things that you'll ever do. Be humble and gentle because you're going to mess up. You don't know everything. And be patient, bearing with one another in love. There are these moments that will arise that you have to ask yourself, do you want to lose your patience or do you want to hold on for just a little bit longer? There are things that as you walk with people for a long time, you wish that they would just get in an instance. Understand exactly what you already know, even though somebody was probably patient with you at one point or another. And that these are important moments that you are able to deepen the relationship or maybe take a step back as you lose your patience. The rest of these are really important, but I think it is built upon this foundation that you see in the story here. Eli has a patience with Samuel, and so too we are called to be patient. The next half verse I want to read, verse 8. Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. It's half a verse, but it's an important verse. When it finally dawns on Eli what is happening, the second thing we need to know is that parents must be able to recognize the voice of God. One of the things that the text, I think, wants you to know is that this took too long. It shouldn't have taken 3 times to understand what was going on. That Eli should have known for the role that he had in Israel, he should have known the first time who was speaking to Samuel. Now, he eventually got there, but he should have known. He had the position, he had the power. He should have known that's the voice of God. As a parent, you need to be able to recognize the voice of God. And what I mean by that is you need to have a faithful life and to be able to point your kids in a faithful manner. Eli was struggling with this. Back in chapter 1, he didn't recognize Hannah's faith for what it was. If you remember, he said, "How are you drunk this early in the morning?" He is far too old to recognize that his sons are way off the path. In fact, it is in this very same story that there's going to be an indictment on Eli and his sons for the life that they've lived. Eli is not the leader he should be. He finally does get there. My question for you this morning, one of the ones that I want you to reflect on is, how many of us are in the same place? That you are failing to recognize the voice of God. You have lots of hopes for your children, for those that you walk with, but it does start with you. This is just a truth about leadership, is that you cannot lead people where you have not been. If you were to say, what do I want for my kids? I want them to be faithful disciples of Christ. I want them to be faithful followers all the days of their life. The question is are you? You cannot lead your child in a place that you are not. I love this scene from Mark chapter 1. It says, verse 35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him. When they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Right before this scene, Jesus is healing people. He's driving out demons. And right after this, he's going to do more of the same. And you would think he might have slept in that morning. Look, God, we had VBS this week. I'm tired. It's time for me to rest and to sleep in. Let me just have a break. I did good work yesterday. Jesus doesn't do that. He gets up and he goes and spends time with the Father. And I love this scene because Peter and the other disciples, they come and find him. And they say, everyone's looking for you. Which is another way of saying, where are you? There's work to be done. But Jesus has stopped to go spend time with God because he knows 2 things. He loves his Father and wants to spend time with him. And he also knows that his best work is done out of that relationship with the Father. And parents, today, my question for you is have your kids ever caught you in a similar place? That when your kids are looking for you, what do they catch you doing? Do they find you reading your Bible? Do they find you in prayer? Do they find a parent that is prioritizing their walk with Christ? Parents, if you want your children to have a strong faith, It starts with your faith, whether or not you will have a strong faith. Well, the story continues. Verse 9, Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down. And if the Lord calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.' So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there." I had not recognized this verse. I had not ever heard that before this week. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." The Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle." Eli finally recognizes what's going on. And finally, he gives good instruction. He hears the voice of the Lord, and he's teaching Samuel to do the same. And he's teaching Samuel how to listen and obey. So the third thing we see is parents train their children to hear God's voice. It takes Eli's help, but Samuel starts to recognize and starts to understand what he's hearing. In fact, I would argue, parents, this is your most important job, to help your children learn to hear God's voice and follow it. Help your kids understand what faith looks like and to live it out. To understand God's call in their life and to obey. Maybe you're thinking about a verse like Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. Start your children off on the way they should go, and when they are old, they won't turn from it. So the question is what do you want for your children? What are the things that are important to you? The same list from earlier. Their academics, their sports, their future jobs, their future spouse, their faith. And I'm a parent, and I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, can't we have it all? Can't I just have all of that be exactly like I want it to? And some people do get it all. You probably know people that you think they just have a picture-perfect life. They've got it all. They checked every box. More often than not, you're going to have to choose. What are you going to prioritize? What are the things that you really want to lean into with your children? And here's the truth, that you know how to disciple certain things in your kids. Let's take academics for an example. You know exactly what to do. Well, it probably starts with, let's get a good night of rest so you can be at school on time and be ready to listen. Did you have any homework today? Let's make sure we get that, get your projects done. If your kid struggles a bit and you have the opportunity, you say, let's get you a tutor. Let's make sure this goes well. And maybe even when it's time for those important tests, let's take a class to make sure we do a good job. Even if it's their future job, you probably know how to do that too. What kind of classes should you take? What college should you go to? Do you know someone that they could job shadow? What will it look like to be successful in that job? And you know our sports teams know how to do this. Here's when practice is. Don't miss it. Let's make sure we get on the right team with the right coach. And if you need extra practice, we'll make sure that happens. And you will never miss a game because you don't want to miss those opportunities. And far too often, we do really great discipling those areas, and we kind of forget our faith. We kind of say, we have lots of opportunity for that, so it's okay if we kind of put it on the back burner. It's okay if we let that go down the list of priorities. As parents, we sometimes struggle to put the same emphasis on our children's faith. And again, seriously, parents, what do you want for your kids? What kind of outcome would you hope for? Let me be real with you for just a second. I warned you earlier. I used to be a youth minister before coming to work at Crosspoint. In that role and in this role, occasionally I hear from parents, and they are mourning the fact that their child is no longer part of a church or no longer faithful after they leave home. And sometimes the parents have done everything right. They've done everything they could do. And what we say, at some point, we have to make our own decisions. And that's true. Sometimes parents say, couldn't the church have done more? And sometimes we could have. We could have done more. But sometimes I really want to look at a parent and I want to say, Your child is living out your values as you taught them. Because far too often, you said, yeah, we stayed up late. Let's sleep in. Yeah, you got to get a job. It's important to learn to work, and it is important to learn to work. So they got to work. Man, sports are just, they're so important. We can't miss that. We can't mess that up. And far too often, your kids, they see exactly what you're doing. And so they live out your values better than you even knew they could. So the question is what do you want for your kids? What kind of outcomes do you hope for? Because it starts with recognizing the voice of God. And most of us are going to be like Samuel, and we need help from other people. Parents, your kids need you to lead the way when it comes to hearing the voice of God, to learning how to have a foundation of faith in their life. It starts with this foundation of patience and of being a faithful person yourself, of making it a priority in your life so you can lead your kids to the same place as you. Now, many of you know the name George Foreman. You might know him from his grill or maybe from his boxing career. I know the grill far more than the other. Now, we don't hear a lot about George Foreman as a parent, but you may know this fun fact about him. He has 12 kids, 7 girls and 5 boys. What are his sons' names? George. I don't want to be too judgmental because I don't know George, but sounds like something's going on there. I'm not a therapist, but maybe he needs one. You might be sitting here right now and you might be going, I'm not the parent that I want to be. I can look back and if I'm being honest with myself, I can see all the ways that my priorities are out of order, especially with my kids. And you might think, well, at least I'm not George over here. We serve the best Father, a God who is rich in grace and mercy and second chances. And I think what he invites you to today is to say, the past is in the past. We can't change it, but we can start living different right now. And so today, if you come in here and you think, man, I wish I could have done something different, all you can do is start today. One of the things that is powerful is that you are part of a church family. People who have gone before you, people who have parented successfully that you can lean on, that you can walk with. People who will surround your kids and help show them what life looks like as a faithful person. So as we close today, our shepherds and their wives will be around the room. And we want to invite you to pray with them. And maybe today you're saying, I need to start fresh today. And I don't know where to turn. I would invite you to start with them. Because we know that we serve the God of second chances. The God who loves you enough to have sent his son for you. And he's ready to walk with you anew today. Won't you come while we stand and sing?